Really thrilled to welcome you all here to our 5th annual 3-Minute Thesis Challenge. Sure, you can applaud for that. Before we dive into the rules of the competition and the presentations, I'm really happy to welcome our Executive Dean of the New School for Social Research, Alex Alinikoff. He's going to welcome us to the event. Thanks, Alex.
All right, you want to get to the contestants, so I'll keep this brief. I'm falling over. I should move forward. Okay. All right. I made a list. What can you do in 3 minutes? You can walk 3 city blocks, right? You can send how many texts? 60? Is that about right? You can microwave dinner, which I'm sure most of you do. You can order an Uber, and you can make up a bad excuse to a loved one, probably in 3 minutes. But surely I know one thing you cannot do, and that is explain an incredibly complex intellectual project that you have produced for a rigorous academic program, right? That's absolutely impossible. Well, tonight we have 13 NSSR students who are going to show it can be done. And I think by the time that they are done, you'll be amazed at the range of interesting topics they're talking about, and you'll be surprised at what can happen in 3 minutes. And that's all I'm going to say, because my 3 minutes is up, and let's get on with the competition.
Thanks, Alex. All right, so let's get into the competition, and I'm going to give you some background and some ground rules here. So the 3-Minute Thesis is a research communication competition that was developed at the University of Queensland in Australia. Graduate students have 3 minutes to present their research and its relevance to a non-specialist audience. Today we have a panel of 4 esteemed judges. We're happy to welcome Quentin Bruneau, Associate Professor of History, Evangeline Ridderford Graham, Editor of Public Seminar, Isabel Arciniegas Guaname, PhD student in Anthropology, and Robert Kostreva, the Vice Dean of the NSSR. So now we get into some of the rules. So each of our finalists will have a single static PowerPoint slide and nothing else. No electronic media, no props, no gimmicks, no notes. They'll give an oral presentation of their work up to, but not beyond 3 minutes. Sherry Cohen, our marketing director for the New School for Social Research, is going to be keeping really close eye on the clock to make sure no one goes over 3 minutes. Because if you do, you are sadly disqualified. So make sure you stick to 3 minutes or under. And so presentations will start right after you do your first mic check, and the judges' decisions and everything is final. So what are the judges going to be looking for? The first area that they're looking at is comprehension and content. Students are tasked with providing an understanding of the background, significance, and impact of their research while avoiding jargon. So questions they might be asking are, was there a clear logic to the presentation? Was adequate time spent on each aspect, et cetera, et cetera. Contestants will also be judged on engagement and communication. So questions judges might be asking themselves would be, did these presentations pique your interest? Did they avoid overgeneralization? Seems hard to do if you only have 3 minutes, but this is a good question. Were they enthusiastic? Did they have a stage presence? Did they make a good use of the PowerPoint slide? Now, here's the really exciting part. There are prizes involved. First place master's student gets $1,000. First place PhD student also gets $1,000. The audience choice, which you will all get to vote on at the end of the competition, gets $750. And second place overall also gets a $750 prize. So those are the rules. That's how things work. This is our judging table. These are our contestants. And we're going to go ahead and get things started. Yeah, let's give a round of applause for our participants. So our first presenter is Lowan Lee. Lowan? Yes. Lowan is currently completing his MA in Anthropology at the NSSR. Prior to coming to New York, he lived 4 years in Mozambique, where he conducted the field work for his thesis. Lowan's talk is entitled Purity and Filth, Commodity and Commodifier, Underwear as a Living Archive.
Some of them travel thousands of miles to arrive in Francisco's stall in the Chipamanine market of Maputo, Mozambique. I want you to think about the underwear that you're wearing right now. Where did it come from? What does it mean to you? And where will it go once you discard it? Secondhand clothes are called calamidades in Mozambique, as they arrive during times of calamities as part of relief efforts, tropical cyclones, floods. Now they are a business. Market vendors specialize in selling leather jackets, bridal wear, tropical shirts, and yes, underwear. So I want to ask the question, how do these secondhand garments, laden with connotations of privacy, filth, and eroticism, navigate the transition from the public social life of the commodity to later, as boundary objects, become reacquired and valued? And how does this transition challenge the dichotomies between pure and polluted and force us to face the ugly entanglements of global commodity chains? Market vendors operate on the bounds of legality. In an outright refusal to relive the colonial hierarchies of clean versus dirty bodies, Ghana banned the sale and the import of secondhand undergarments. Zambia and Tanzania followed suit. As recently as 2023, Ghana deployed 200 officials to fine and even imprison these vendors. As matter out of place, their impurity is scrutinized in scientific discourse, where peer-reviewed articles are published laying out their potentiality to transmit diseases such as hepatitis A, B, or C. Viruses that would not survive the transatlantic journey they are subjected to. Upasare impatla, tells me Francisco as he hands me the underwear. Upasare ishishangana for to iron, from the Portuguese verb repassar. It is a word of mixed origins from the colonial impositions. His brother gestures to the act of ironing, to iron, to flatten, to remove the existence of a previous wear. Upasare, to flatten, is not to conform to a colonial aesthetic. It is not a purification ritual. It is not to make the dirty pure. It is not about refusal and then repair. Rather, it forces us to look beyond the binary, beyond linearity. It recognizes that bodies, histories, and commodities intermingle in ways that defy simple categorization. Upasare is to flatten, is to move forward rather than muddle in the past and present. It is to move forward, eyes wide open. Thank you.
Thank you, Lowan. I just want to do something really quick just to make sure both mics are working super well, because it sounded like Lowan's was cutting out a little bit. Is there the other mic over here? Okay, great. Let's see. Page on this one is less beat up, so maybe you guys should use this one. Okay, great. So we'll just make sure we're using the consistent mic. All right, thank you very much, Lowan. Our second presenter is Carla Canovi from Economics. Carla is a second-year master's student in the economics department whose research interests include critical geography, autonomous organization, and hierarchy. Carla's talk is entitled The BQE Underpass, What Urban Voids Can Teach Us About Public Space.
Mic check. Have you ever walked through a public space, whether it be a park, a plaza, or even just a sidewalk, and felt as though the space itself was telling you, you don't belong here? If so, you aren't alone. Across the city, our public spaces are becoming increasingly exclusive and hostile. Our spaces have too many rules, too many cameras, too many police, and way too many people who feel as though they have more of a right to the space than others. This is leading to feelings of alienation, rejection, and the loss of community. The dissolution of inclusive public spaces can be traced back to one of the core underlying assumptions of mainstream urban design, specifically that without strict rules, surveillance, and police presence, individuals will behave in violent and destructive ways, causing the space to collapse into disarray. But what if I told you that there is a space without any of these things, without surveillance, without rules, and without police, where instead of behaving violently, individuals engage with each other and the space through collaboration, community building, and cooperation? This space is the underpass of the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, which is considered an urban void. With no clear ownership or rules, the space is essentially a no man's land. One of the communities which is formed in this underpass is the Gallery BQE Collective, an autonomous, non-hierarchical group of artists which wheat paste their art onto the columns, which you can see behind me. Through extensive observation and interviews with the group's members, I've found that despite the many differences among the artists, they all share the same feelings of connection, belonging, and empowerment. When they aren't working on their art or wheat pasting, the artists spend their time picking up trash along the underpass and making repairs to the columns, actively working to maintain and improve the space. I believe that there are core reasons that these behaviors arise in this underpass and urban void, specifically the lack of surveillance, rules, and social expectations, which allow individuals to appropriate the space to their specific needs and desires. This sense of belonging and mutual ownership over the space encourages collaboration and community building. If we allow individuals to not just use the public spaces in their communities, but to actively change them to meet their needs and desires, we can help bring back this sense of connection and belonging that has been lost from our public spaces. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. Next up is going to be Diana Greenfield from Liberal Studies. Diana is a social justice advocate, nonprofit leader, and community engagement strategist with a passion for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. With extensive experience in nonprofit management, philanthropy, and program development, she has led initiatives supporting underserved communities, immigrant youth, and environmental justice. Diana is currently completing her master's in liberal studies, focusing on gender, urban spaces, and social impact. Diana's talk is entitled Green Spaces, Gendered Places, Unraveling Micro-Machismo and Gender Barriers to Urban Nature in New York City. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you. Check. Joy has gender restrictions. Imagine you're a little girl growing up in Manhattan. Central Park is just across the street. The grass is green, the playground full of laughter, but you're not allowed to go. Girls shouldn't be outside too much. It isn't safe. What will people think? Sorry. Sorry. It went right out of my head. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Just, yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I'll never make it up at this point. Sorry. Remember the bike. Press the screen. The playground full of attribute. You're not allowed to go. Girls shouldn't be outdoors too much. It isn't safe. What will people think? For generations, Latina girls have heard these words, shaping not just their childhood, but their access to nature for a lifetime. We know that green spaces affect well-being. They improve mental health. Foster community, and even extend lifespans. But not everyone has equal access. 27% of Latino males engage in daily outdoor activities. That's down from 35% for white males. Latina girls, just 18%, half. For them, uh, parks weren't just inaccessible because of urban planning failures. They were off limits because of something more ingrained, micro-machismo, everyday expressions of gender control that quietly restrict movement, independence, and joy. I conducted a survey of Latino women across generations, hoping to understand how gender norms influenced access to nature. The results staggering. 73% feel safe in city parks only if accompanied by someone else. Older respondents reported being told directly not to engage in outdoor activities, citing fears of losing respectability. Younger respondents still experience these restrictions now, only shaped as personal safety fears. Wrapping up, one woman said, I'd never learned to ride a bike. My brothers did. I was told it wasn't for girls. And then there was this. I wasn't allowed to ride a boy's bike, the only kind available, because my parents feared I might lose my virginity. A bicycle of fear, a seat of fear passed down through generations. Thank you. Yeah, back to the little girl at the park's edge. What if she heard, instead of these warnings, go?
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Diana. Next up is Kenzie Rattray from Liberal Studies. Kenzie is a master's student in liberal studies at the New School for Social Research, where she investigates how civilizations form, fracture, and remember. Her research weaves together early political structures, mass psychosis, speculative fiction, and extinction to ask how collective realities are built and what happens when they collapse. Kenzie's talk is entitled The Tedium of Extinction. Kenzie.
Test, test. Test, test. When a female giant octopus has eggs, she isolates herself and guards them to the point of starvation. This is her final act. How does she know to do this? Just as her mother did. This is instinct, not something she learned to do. Test, test, test. My question is, what's the difference between instinct and memory? My research involves beginning with this question and asking how knowledge moves on through time. My thesis, the Tedium of Extinction, explores how memory is passed on through bodies and time. I have a terrible memory. I forget everything, obviously, and I know that my DNA holds eons of information. I know language, not because I can recall learning language, but because it is embedded in my nervous system. So, extinction is not
an individual process. It's a planetary one that happens at the individual level. Quickly, let's go back to the octopus. Do you think she was sad at the end of her life or fulfilled? Do you think that she had any feelings at all? Do you think she even chose to sacrifice herself for her offspring? And so, with humans, how do we posit extinction instinct at the end of the world?
Thank you, Kenzie. All right, next up, we will have Noah Cupper from philosophy. Noah is an MA student in philosophy and studying psychoanalysis, exploring intersections of decolonial theory, critical philosophy, and feminist thought. Beyond academics, they enjoy attending concerts, writing music, and finding joy in cooking. Their talk is entitled Hyper Muscles and Fragile Binaries, Gender, Bodybuilding, and Resistance. Noah.
Check. I want to start off by telling a story about my sister and I walking through a bookstore. I remember that she picked up a bodybuilding magazine, and on the cover she called the person a pillow man. Today, I want to talk about the pillow. I want us to think about why muscular men inspire admiration and why muscular women provoke discomfort. This is to say that I don't think this problem is necessarily beyond bodybuilding. And so to get us started, I want to talk a little bit about the history of women's bodybuilding. It emerged in the 1970s in its contemporary competitive form, and the backlash was almost immediate. By 1992, female competitors were told to strip their muscularity by 20% to appear more feminine, and by 2013, the women's bodybuilding category was completely eliminated from the sport's two biggest arenas, the Arnold and the Olympia. The message was quite clear, and that there is a limit to how much space women can take up. And so as we go through this presentation, I want us to think about two important questions. Why would muscularity strip the competitors of femininity? And what does this discomfort reveal about the ways that race, gender, and class condition our perceptions about bodies? Again, like I mentioned, I don't think this is necessarily a problem just within bodybuilding, since we're seeing this discomfort outside of the sport in, for example, efforts to police trans bodies and restrict reproductive autonomy. We live in a world where bodies are not only expected to physically produce, but also visually look as if they can produce. And muscular women end up completely gutting these categories because they look as if they are not able to adhere to the expectations that women are expected to visually and physically adhere to. And these are the categories of bearing children and labor. We see the way then muscular women are able to reveal how power operates not just above, like in bodybuilding institutions, but also between competitors themselves who will remark about larger bodybuilders saying things like, she's too much, that's not a woman anymore, and I would never want to look like that. We also see the way that race is deeply ingrained here. For example, bodybuilders like Iris Kyle, who you can see over here. I can't move from there. Iris Kyle has won the most bodybuilding competitions out of anyone, both male or female, at the Olympia, gaining 15 winning titles, yet she is never spoken about when talking about the sport's best competitors. Meanwhile, competitors like Ronnie Coleman is often considered the pinnacle of the sport, but Ronnie Coleman is typically talked about when we consider stereotypes around racialized masculinity. Class is also really important when we consider, for example, who has access to pharmaceuticals and who is punished for that access. So the pillow man, far from being laughable, is actually quite a threat because she exposes just how fragile our expectations and categories of gender, nature, and strength really are.
Thank you very much, Noah. Next up is Paul Capuzzo from Politics. Paul is a second-year MA student earning his degree in politics. His main areas of interest include international political economy, critical development theory, and temporal politics. Paul also serves as a research assistant for the Decolonial Interpretive Research Lab hosted out of California Polytechnic University, Pomona. He also instructs summer courses in introductory economics and politics through his local community college's Gear Up programs for incoming high school seniors. Paul's talk is entitled A Perfect Future for Whom? Solo Modeling in Chile's Economic Reordering. And let me get your slide. And great, Paul.
Test right here. All right. What if I told you that a single economic model that was created in the 1950s helped shape the destinies of entire nations in the global south? This wasn't because the model was perfect or because it guaranteed or even offered lessened inequality, but because the model offered a predictable, manageable, and perhaps above all else, profitable future. Here I'm talking about the solo growth model. The solo model suggests that if a country saves and if it invests enough, it'll end up with a better destiny, a better tomorrow. But in my work, I didn't find that that was the case. The model suggests that eventually an economy will converge to what economists call a steady state, a point of sustainable, long-term, and sustained growth. But that's not what I found. Instead, I found serial disruption, where policymakers kept implementing the program over and over again to reach different steady states. And instead of that gradual growth that it promised, it instead wound up implementing widespread disparities and created fractured timelines and fractured temporalities, where some benefited immediately, such as foreign investors, such as getting tax cuts, regulatory invariability, and special access to capital for just simply investing. They were able to cash in first. Meanwhile, domestic workers, they were told to wait. They were saddled with income inequality, with rising unemployment, and among poverty. And the numbers back that up as well. 19% of wages decreased what they were prior to the reforms. 45% of the population lived in poverty, and unemployment didn't decrease, it increased to 23.7%. This is what I mean when we say postponed prosperities. The better tomorrow that they were promised was infinitely delayed. And it was partially delayed because it was baked into the formula. Those delays, those suffering of unemployment and poverty were made to seem rational and necessary, if not because of a temporary sacrifice. And that's the way it was framed, as temporary. Here, time was being utilized as control. Policymakers and economists understood that they couldn't just manage capital flows. They were able to manage people's horizons, their tomorrows. And in doing so, time became control. My work doesn't understand the solo model as just an economic or technical artifact. Instead, it's a political one. It's about how those horizons, how those tomorrows, how those are managed. Economic models are often claimed to be neutral arbiters of predicting the future, helping shape it. But that's the thing, they aren't neutral. The access to that future is never guaranteed. And that's what my paper seeks to look at. Not only are models not guaranteed, and not only do they not just predict the future, they help create them, and access to that future is never neutral.
Thank you very much, Paul. And now we will welcome our last of the MA candidates for the 3-minute thesis, Alexandra Madge Paredes from Sociology. Alexandra holds degrees in philosophy, psychology, and is currently in a sociology graduate program, obviously here at the NSSR. She is an interdisciplinary researcher that focuses on social conflicts, protests, violence, and regime change with a focus on authoritarianism. She is currently working on the representation of protests in the media and its subjugation to political interests in authoritarian settings, mainly in Peru, where she is from. Her talk is entitled Framing a Social Conflict, News Media on the Peruvian Protests of 2023. And Alex, take it away.
Testing. Okay.
In January of 2023, I went to a protest in Lima, Peru, where I'm from. I chose a spot in the city that was particularly calm during protests and very touristy. After about 2 hours, the police started shooting tear gas cans at us and arresting people. The crowd quickly dispersed. This scene repeated itself over and over, with increasing violence both from the protesters and from the police. Why this happened is the aim of my research, and how this is being used by the media. Over those months, over a few months in 2023, over 50 people, 50 civilians were killed while protesting. One was even shot on national TV. The streaming, of course, was cut, and the journalists changed the topic. How is the media so easily disturbed, so easily used to distort information, to outright lie without consequence? Why is this happening? I see a shift towards authoritarianism that I think you can all agree with. I think we can also agree with the fact that the media is being weaponized and language is being weaponized to control narratives in favor of groups of power. So what I'm doing is analyzing speech, specifically in Peruvian media, contrasting the use of certain newspapers controlled by the Fujimori regime in the 90s and certain mechanisms being used today. What I can see is how authoritarianism is permeating through everyday events, such as just reading the newspaper. I have found 3 things. First, phrasing is key in framing processes. Framing processes is creating a narrative so that population can understand an event. And it also has an effect in how the population feels towards the event and the kind of position they take, sometimes accepting or even demanding violence to manage a social conflict. Second, silence is strategic. Not mentioning certain events or certain specifics can help build a narrative that is more convincing and better for the people in power. And third, there is an exploitation of cultural references that incite fear. And inciting fear can make the population shift towards accepting violence as mechanisms of action. If I can leave you with one thought, is understanding and informing about these mechanisms in culture-specific contexts can help us with this wave of democratic breakdown that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Let's have a round of applause for all of our MA presenters. All right, so we will now begin this section for the PhD student presentations. And first up will be Josheka Chauhan. Josheka is a clinical psychology doctoral student here at the New School. She works in the center manager at the New School Center for Global Mental Health. Her experience includes developing a digitized version of the WHO's Self-Help Plus stress management intervention and providing cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness-based therapy as a counseling psychologist in India. As a researcher and therapist, she has worked with New York City community centers and Indian NGOs, providing mental health support to diverse, vulnerable populations. Her presentation is entitled Adaptation of a Scalable Group-Based Stress Management Intervention for International Students at a Higher Education Institution in the US. Take it away.
Hello. Imagine leaving your home country to chase your dreams, only to feel completely alone, facing academic stress, cultural adjustment, experiencing new countries, rules, challenges, visa struggles, financial struggles, etc.
International students, for most international students, this isn't just a moment, it's there every day. For students, mental health has been something that has gained more attention over the years, but international students are often still overlooked. Because of this, we decided to adapt Self-Help Plus for international students at New School. Self-Help Plus is a stress management intervention developed by the World Health Organization for people facing extreme adversity. Self-Help Plus is based on ACT, Acceptance Commitment Therapy, and it delivers 5 key skills: grounding, unhooking, being kind, acting on our values, and making room for difficult thoughts and feelings. I animated Self-Help Plus, which was originally meant to be delivered as pre-recorded audio material, and you can see the animations there. And now the program is meant to be delivered as a 2-day workshop for international students. During those 2 days, students engage with these short animated adapted videos, but also engage in discussions and activities with other students led by a trained facilitator. We conducted this study with the help of focus group discussions and key informant interviews with the student health services staff and other students, 14 students and 3 staff members in total. During these discussions, we took their feedback to make sure that we were adapting and making those changes in accordance to what they really needed, and also made sure we identified key problems for international students, which was social isolation, academic stress, financial stress, and cultural adjustment. The students found the workshop to be extremely helpful. They especially like grounding and unhooking as skills. But more than that, the most common theme that came out was a feeling of connectedness. Self-Help Plus workshop in person gave them the opportunity to connect with other students and a space to feel like other students similar to them were facing similar struggles. So based on this, I feel that Self-Help Plus can eventually be a part of the university student health services ecosystem or wellness system, and I hope that this is something that students eventually find helpful for themselves, not only for stress management, but also to provide themselves with a feeling of connectedness with others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up will be Jordana Douglas. Jordana is a clinical psychology PhD candidate at the NSSR. Her research combines quantitative and qualitative methodologies to explore the nature of intergenerational trauma in Black families, using a trauma-informed lens to understand impact and outcomes of intergenerational storytelling and familial connection on the presence and severity of trauma symptoms. She hopes that through her research and clinical work, she will help expand the field's understanding of trauma in communities of color and contribute to the development of culturally and trauma-informed interventions for Black individuals and families. Her presentation is entitled A Mixed Methods Study of Family Connectedness, Storytelling, and Intergenerational Trauma in Black Families. And Jordana.
Intergenerational trauma occurs when the children of those who have experienced a traumatic event show effects of that trauma despite not experiencing it themselves. And this is often a result of the way their traumatized parents engage with and relate to them. Starting with research in the families of Holocaust survivors, intergenerational trauma has been explored in populations across the globe, and yet it remains understudied in communities of color, more specifically, Black communities and families. Not only this, or the little research that does exist in Black families often fails to take into account the culturally specific experiences of trauma that are often most salient for them. Things like adverse childhood experiences of abuse and neglect, and repeated instances of discrimination and racism. Not only this, but while studies in other populations have sought to explore potential protective and healing mechanisms for intergenerational trauma, this too remains understudied in Black families. And this exclusion prevents us from having a fuller understanding of the way intergenerational trauma manifests in Black families and how we might be able to help. My research aims to bring together these constructs to collectively understand how they might impact a Black individual's mental health and well-being. I began this research a few years ago while working on my master's thesis, and I interviewed 17 Black adults across 8 families about their experience of intergenerational trauma. And these deeply vulnerable interviews illuminated not only the potential nature of storytelling across generations in their families, but also of a general sense of connectedness and closeness to their families. From here, I started to develop my dissertation, where I plan to expand on these findings. I hope to conduct a larger study where I will collect questionnaire data from approximately 200 Black adults and interview 20 Black adults. By engaging in this more fine-tuned mixed methods approach, and by asking more specific and detailed questions, I will be able to collect both quantitative and qualitative data that will provide more context and texture to their experiences. In other words, they won't just be statistics on a page. So why does this matter? Well, we know that Black individuals' lifetime prevalence rate of PTSD exceeds those of other populations, and we also know that far more individuals experience traumatic events than go on to develop PTSD. By using this more holistic approach, we will gain a better perspective of their experiences that will aid in the development of culturally responsive and trauma-informed treatments, and ultimately is a step towards truly equitable mental health care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will have Kartik Manikam. Kartik is a PhD candidate in the economics department and doctoral research fellow at the Schwartz Center for Economic Policy and Analysis. Kartik received his MA and MPhil in economics from the Center for Economic Studies and Planning and Jawaharlal Nehru University, India, and is consulted for the World Bank, UNISCAP, and Club of Rome. His research interests include labor, development, and political economy. His presentation is called A Mixed Methods Analysis of the Impact on Student Debt on Retirement Security.
Mic check. So student loans are not just a problem for young people. There are about 2.1 million Americans older than the age of 55 in the US with student debt that's in their own name. So this is not debt for their children, this is their own debt. So my research looks at how this pillar of the American work experience, student loans, affects the other pillar of the American work experience, namely retirement. So how would that exactly work? Well, traditional student loan theory basically categorizes education as an investment. The idea is that you take on this debt with the idea of getting higher wages later on. The problem with that individualized approach, however, is that the retirement system is also individualized. Workers are expected to save for their own retirement through 401k system. And Social Security exists, but that's only meant to account for about 40% of your retirement savings. And if you claim your Social Security benefits early, you get a lower benefit. So what happens if you're an older worker who's starting to creep up on retirement and you have all this debt that you've not been able to pay off? What are you left to do? Do you have to make some difficult choices about, do you choose to work longer, hoping to stave off retirement a little bit more and pay off your debts and try to save as well? Do you start claiming your Social Security earlier, condemning yourself to a lower benefit in the hopes of staying afloat? Essentially, this debt-creating institution overwhelms the wealth-creating institution of saving for retirement. So how do I look at this question? I use a combination of quantitative analysis of the survey of consumer finance and participatory interviews with debtors and community organizations who've been engaging with this issue. The data analysis of the survey of consumer finance looks to understand whether people with debt who are older have less retirement savings, are likely to work longer, and are also likely to claim Social Security earlier. And the interviews are meant to look at the narrative of the decision-making processes that people have to make. And what are my results that speak to this? Well, firstly, we can see that people with no debt have significantly more savings than people with debt. But people without having gone to college have even more savings. I also find out that people with student debt are about 2.7 times more likely to work longer and about 1.7 times more likely to start claiming earlier. And the interviews feed into that narrative. They talk about people that are caught between these twin systems. So why is my research important? Because it speaks to the failure of two hyper-individualized systems at both ends of your working life and will inform policy analysis to improve these systems and move away from an individualized system to a more socialized workforce that recognizes that these things are interlinked and that people shouldn't have to choose between a good education and a good retirement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll have Pavlina Levandovska. Pavlina is a PhD candidate in politics. Her dissertation research is on the politics of education reform of low-performing public schools. Prior to coming to the New School, Pavlina received her MA in International Relations at Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, and an MA in International Business from the Prague University of Economics and Business in the Czech Republic. Her presentation is entitled The Politics of Public Education Reform and Its Paradox, de Blasio's Community School Policy in NYC. And Pavlina.
In the early 2000s, our country made a promise to give excellent education to every single child in the country. This promise came out of a paradox. We as a society believe in education and its power to do good. But we also grapple with deep inequalities such as poverty and structural racism. Without acknowledging this contradiction, we invested an increasing amount of money to actually continuously reform our public schools. At the same time, the test results will show that we were not reaching the goal. Who was made accountable? We would blame the lowest achieving schools. While it is evidenced that in the United States, the struggling schools concentrate the most vulnerable, the high-need students, and minority schools are also disproportionately represented. In my project, I studied the moment in time in New York City when the newly elected mayor, Bill de Blasio, embraced the change towards these schools. New York City is the largest public school system, and its policies can lead to a trend. So this new approach, struggling schools would receive academic support, but also a non-academic support. What it meant is that you could get physical or dental checkups. I analyzed the political process in de Blasio's de Blasio's two new initiatives. It was the Community Schools Program and the Renewal Schools Program. Both of them were launched around the same time, but and also they had schools at the core. However, one of them became successful, the other one was perceived as a failed policy. When I compared these two programs, what I found was that one of them was top-down, and this was in contrast to the philosophy of the community schools, which is to actually have broad collaboration. So this top-down approach was actually, the reason behind it was that the Renewal Schools program was based on the official category of the New York State lowest achieving schools. These are schools that score at 5 to 10% among all other schools. I would argue that the official category shaped the decision-making in the political process and made it less successful.
Thank you, Pavlina. And last but not least, our final presenter of the night is Adam Kohler-Brown. Adam is a PhD student in sociology and an adjunct lecturer at CUNY Hunter College. He works on culture, politics, and theory with a specific focus on the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. His presentation is entitled Conflicting Memories of Insurrection. And Adam, take it away.
Check. We don't remember January 6th. That's terrifying. My research investigates the ways ordinary Americans have held on to the January 6th attack in the last 4 years. I collect hundreds and hundreds of pieces of memory work that ordinary Americans have put together and sort them into 12 distinct categories. These categories have their own theoretical logics, accounts of democracies, characters, and narrative forms. I want to tell you about 5 of them. First, physical remnants. Trash. This is trash generated by January 6 attackers. This is waste. This is t-shirts. This is signs. This is also urine and feces. This is a memory of January 6 told through objects, through things. Second, participants' media. This is digital media created by attackers during the attack. Facebook posts, videos of the hallways, and the weirdest selfies you'll ever see in your life. These are stories about democracy that fit into a narrative form. They center on the experience of the attack and then translate that into digital media. Sixth, the investigative report. This is the supposedly authoritative memory of January 6th. Hundreds of pages of documentation, official government experts. Nobody's read it. Nobody. And worse still, Republicans are creating more and more counter reports. The authoritative memory isn't so authoritative. Seventh, participants' experiences. These are the experiences of police officers during the attack. These center on psychological and physical trauma, the crushing of doors and the hitting of batons. These stories are told in terms of autobiographies, documentary films, and as you see here, watercolors. They attempt to translate personal experiences of violence into theoretical accounts of democracy. And then finally, 11th, January 6 Patriot enshrining work. These are the supporters of attackers. These are families and especially mothers that work very hard to perpetuate the memory of January 6 attackers. They hold vigils, songs, clothing. They do everything they can to hold on to these memories. I have a lot more to say about this. Let me get to the conclusions. I find 3 things. First, that neither side has a good memory genre. Neither side knows what kind of story January 6 is. We jump from Instagram Reels to investigative reports to apparently watercolors. Second, the left specifically lacks an agent of memory. We don't know who can hold on to the memory of January 6th. We've invested very hard in police officers, but few of us believe they can really understand democracy after Black Lives Matter. Third, and finally, the right is well positioned to remember January 6th. Only the right has a clear-cut marker, has political backing, has financial backing, and a storyline. My claim then is that we are not in a crisis of democracy in terms of politics or economics or rights or constitutions. We are in a crisis of memory. We don't know what to remember. And January 6th is quickly slipping through our hands. Maybe it's already too late.
Thank you very much, Adam. Let's have a huge round of applause for all of our presenters. All right, thank you all so much. Evangeline Ridderford-Graham is going to announce our results on behalf of the judges. Intense deliberations and come to a conclusion here.
Did you say you had it all written down, Aaron? We apologize for keeping you waiting so very long. Our choices are, in the MA category, Alexandra. In PhD, Jordana. Our second prize overall, Kartik. Audience Prize, Lowan.
Thank you all. And thank you all so much once again. Congratulations to everybody who won. If you didn't win one of the top prizes, you're still not going home empty-handed. We have Moleskine notebooks embossed with 3MT NSSR on them for you. So come up and talk to Jennifer about getting that. And we'll do a photo with the winners. So if you guys want to come up here, thank you very much. Thank you all again for coming out tonight. This is a great event.